everyone. Welcome to Zonan Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. This is a podcast exploring the connections between Japanese anime and Canadian media. And because once wasn't enough, we are once again going to be talking about the famous Japanese-Canadian co-production Cybersix. And we have three guests joining us today. The producer of the Cybersix DVD and Blu-ray released by Discotech. And yes, there is a Blu-ray now that hadn't been announced the last time we talked about Cybersix, but it's out now and it's great. You should buy it. It is absolutely worth the horrible import fees to bring it into Canada. But yeah, it's Brady Hartel. Brady, thanks so much for coming on.
No problem. This is awesome. Thank you very much for having me again.
And thanks for all the hard work you did on that Blu-ray and the new special features that are on there too. A couple of new interviews.
Commentaries, more artwork, the pitch Bible. I was able to uncover a lot for the new Blu-ray for sure.
The pitch Bible in particular is amazing. Incredible. I don't think anyone was expecting that.
That's thanks to Catherine Gerzik, who had it and she was willing to scan it for me. She very kindly went to, I think, a Kinko's or something up there in Canada and scanned it for me. And I made sure to give her some money for that because it was really cool for her to do that and find that for me.
It's such important work, and I'm so happy that we have that. It can deepen your appreciation of this show so much. Also joining us again for actually, you've been on this show quite a bit. It is our noted CanCon otaku, Cybersix cosplayer as enthusiast, and an alter ego of Sammy. It's a Z the Raccoon.
Hello. Hi, everybody. I've been cosplaying Cybersix since like 12 years ago now. Yeah. I've done too many versions of her. But I really, really love Cybersix, and thank you again so much for having me here. I love talking Cybersix, and this is just an honor of a podcast to be on. So thank you, Jesse.
No problem. And you were just in Japan recently.
I was. I'm so fresh from Japan. I'm still jet lagged. So we'll see. We'll see if I fall asleep on time tonight or not.
There's a lot of Kinnikuman stuff there. Did you get your fill?
Oh my God, yes. I did. I got my fix. My suitcase was full.
Yeah, I went to Japan pretty recently myself, and had a good time. Also joining us today is a man who has certainly been to Japan, as well as Buenos Aires and many other places, and he's done some amazing work in the process. It is an honor to have him on. He was the executive producer of the Cybersix animated series, the founder of NOA, Network of Animation, and many feel the architect behind the show, I think might be accurate to say. It is Hervé Bédard. Hervé, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for tracking me down, because obviously I'm trying to hide as much as possible.
Sorry.
Yeah, we can thank Z for tracking you down. Something I did not expect to happen.
Yeah.
And thank you for accepting the invitation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Seriously, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure.
I was honestly just trying to get some words of encouragement for the Cybersix panel that I put on at Anime North this year, and what you wrote back was incredibly sweet, and it made me cry. So, yeah, again, thank you so much for replying. Taking the time to reply just made my day, my week, my month, my year, whatever.
Whatever.
Brady has continued to do some great archaeology in getting a variety of perspectives and information on the production of Cybersix, because there's just so much to say about it. And, Hervé Bédard is one of the key names that always keeps coming up. And I'm hoping that we can, explore even more about Cybersix and NOA and Canadian production and different facets of animation. So, Hervé, just where to begin? You have a very storied history in animation in general. How did you get into it? Where did you start?
Well, when I was about 30 years old, my girlfriends were always dropping me, and I realized, well, I need to do something. And I went back to Montreal. I was in Paris at that time. working at the Quebec delegation. And I went back to Montreal and I decided to go in fine arts. And during the day, to pay for fine arts, I was working I got a job in an animation studio at Michael Mills in Montreal. And for about 4 or 5 years, I did animation at Michael Mills and went to school at night to do the fine art stuff. And at the end, I realized that I'm going to stick with animation because it pays. Fine art, there was no money to be made in there enough to do anything. And that's how it started. And quite quickly, I met a guy who was working in Japan to supervise TV series made by the Americans. And the Americans enjoy hiring Canadian because we had an overview of the entire process in animation. And they needed a supervisor in Asia to supervise all the production they were doing. Because like at Michael Mills, we were doing everything from obviously drawing and doing everything, doing our own pencil tests on 16 millimeter black and white, going in the basement with the can and developing the film and putting it on the steam deck and watching if our animation was working. We knew the whole process. So I went to Japan as a supervisor for American TV series at the end of the 80s, more or less. And it was a contract for 3 months, and more or less it lasted about 4 years. Every 3 months I had to renew, going in, going out, going in, going out of the country to renew the passport, the visa to be in Japan. So in Japan, well, then that's where we absolutely discovered animation, because Canada in those days, there was National Film Board, and a few Englishmen like Michael Mills and Jerry Potterton, and I'm not sure if it's Jerry. Anyway, Potterton, who were all coming from England because animation was strong in England, but not in Canada. And the National Film Board had imported people from England to open the studio, use animation as a way to present Canada to the rest of the world. So in all the Canadian embassy, you could go and get some animation from the film board, and it was very popular. So all this to say that I'm in Japan, realizing that animation is not only for funny cartoons, but it could be also for adult, for education, there were libraries and video places where there were blue stores and pink stores, different stores. And the blue stores were for boys and men, and the pink one were for girls and women. I mean, you had TV series for a newly wed person, women who had one kid, for example. You had a TV series for all the problem you have when you have one kid, et cetera, et cetera. It was absolutely flabbergasting. So with the people we were working, at some point, I was working for DIC, the company called DIC, and we were doing 325 half hours per season. That was such an enormous amount of show. We were hiring studios all over the place. I think we had 20 studios working for us.
How many different shows is that? That had to be like 7 or 8 different shows at a time?
Yeah. Roughly, we were doing shows for ABC, NBC, and CBS all the Saturday morning. We were doing almost everything. I mean, from Alf, Ghostbuster, all those kind of show that you had in Saturday morning stuff.
Was the Archie show one of them?
No, not Archie.
No.
Okay, but Dennis the Menace. I mean, actually, if you go, I have IMDb profile.
Oh, okay.
So Hervé Bédard, IMDb, and if you go in there, you'll see I worked in about 1,000 different production.
Oh my God.
So it was a zoo because, and the reason why we were so popular is that Jean Chalepin, who opened the DIC, had made a connection in Japan. He was from France. He had a studio in France. He opened a studio in Japan to do his production, a little bit of production. And then he was in LA working for Anna Barbara, got fired because he was the wolf with the sheep in there. and, and he opened his own shop. And he was able to do the equivalent. We were able to do the equivalent of a syndicated show, which is 65 half hours, at the same time than everybody else was doing 13 half hour. As you know, that was the standard because 13 half hour is from September to December, one per week. So all the new show comes out in September, one per week. Then from January to May, they repeat the same show. And then in the summer, there's no new broadcasts. So if you do 65 half hour, it's one a day from September to Christmas, basically.
Well,
And the price were extremely reasonable. So all the broadcaster much prefer to have a syndicated show. So we just produce. Well, just to tell you, 300 shows was what the entire European were producing in 1 year. And we were producing at one studio in LA. That flooded, basically.
Yeah, Deke at the time was super prolific. Like they had so much, like Ghostbusters, Captain N, Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, I
endless.
was the artistic director on Super Mario.
Oh wow, that's one of my favorite shows as a kid too. That show.
It was terrible.
See, here's the thing. Like you say it's terrible, but people have like super fond memories of that. I certainly do myself.
Yeah, it's funny.
I mean, I know now how goofy and weird and funny it is,
Yeah.
It's a neat thing to see that show, especially since some of the for that and Captain N, some of the pre-production art, some of that's like how different it looked at first is sort of leaking out now too.
Yeah, it was really difficult. I almost died doing that show because, at some point, Jean Chalepin sold it to Andy Edwards, and Andy had to borrow $90 million to buy it. And so the cost of the money was $1 million a month. And therefore, he would sell all those shows to NBC, ABC, and CBS, and then he would take off at least $1 million per month of the budget to pay the debt, and he was giving us the rest, to do the production. And we had to build our crew. We had to. I mean, there was 250 people on staff in the administration and none in production. So when we started production, we had to hire at least 250 people just to do the pre-pro. So everybody was fighting in LA to get artists and stuff like that. So I mean, it was just an incredible, fertile moment in animation, the 80s, mostly because us who were in Japan, sometimes we were 30 people in Japan, the supervisor, 12 supervisor, a crew to do pre-production work, all the editor. The way it was working is that the show was sent to various studios. We had to do all the pre-production, send the show to the studio. The studio was sending back the show at any moment of the day or the night. And then they would call us in, one editor, to splice the show, splice the 35, and one supervisor to go and call for the retake, because there was always so many retakes, and it has to be a minimum amount of quality. But we were so rushed; it was unbelievable. So we would get phone call at 2:00 in the morning. Okay, one show is in. Let's come and check it out. And so we would do that. And then in the studios, the animator would sleep on their desks, waiting for the retake to finish the retake before going to bed in the morning.
What was the language barrier like? Because this, like nowadays, we have Google Translate and all that on our phone, but back then, like obviously, none of that existed. Like, so
well,
how did that work?
Well, it worked that there was translators for everything, because they didn't want us to speak Japanese because there was too many mistakes.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, Japanese is not very complicated as a language, so we were able to talk Japanese, but there was translators all the
Mhm.
time, and the translator became, some became producer in LA, those translators, because they know everything.
Mhm.
Yeah, when you're going from different parts of production doing one job, you kind of get a grasp of how everything goes together. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, yeah, and eventually they were translating at all level of productions with clients and everything, so it was really interesting.
Now, when you did like the editing phase, were they mailing the 35 to you overseas, or what was happening with that? Like, were you doing
Oh,
that?
you didn't have time, so we called it courier. So
Mhm.
people from LA would come, take the plane, come to Tokyo for the weekend, grab the film, and go back on the plane,
Mhm.
because there was no time for shipping or anything like that.
Mhm.
FedEx was too slow, And when it arrived in LA, the studio was in Burbank, and they had to put the sound, finalize all the sound
Mhm.
that was not done. So they had to put the music, they had to put all the voices at the right place. Well, obviously we had prepared all that in Tokyo,
Mhm.
because we had to splice the sound. As a supervisor, we would get soundtrack that were measuring about 29 minutes, and the show was 26 minutes. So we had to chop 3 minutes of voices.
Mhm.
So it was really a lot of adjustments to be made. So, and sometimes it happened that in Burbank, we didn't even have time to take the master and bring it down to ABC, the other side of the mountain, of Hollywood Mountain, Burbank in the valley. So we had to broadcast from a little station in Burbank, about 4 blocks from the studio, and they would transfer the airwaves to ABC.
Oh wow. Okay.
That was our rush, because if we were late, it was $75,000 of costs of the not duty but penalty for a late show, type of thing.
Yeah,
But the
because
most important, but the most important part of all that is the staff and the team of people that were discovering animation in Japan, discovering that animation can be not for kids only, but for adults too, or older audience, which was the case 40 years back with the original Superman and all the Disney stuff. In the movies theater, it was for adults. Even Bugs Bunny was for adults. And there was a long period of time from the 40s up to the 80s where it came only for kids, So that whole group of animators and artists, we wanted to bring the animation for young adult. That was a little bit our goal, in a sense. And basically, that's why I was asking if you knew Peter Chung and Aeon Flux. And Aeon Flux is quite a nice production. It's really interesting. And MTV, when MTV started Liquid Television.
yeah, And Flux, that the head, the Max.
It's the face with the eyebrow slapping a fly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the iconic image.
Yeah. As a very little kid, I remember it came on at 10 o'clock at night, and I must have been in like 7th grade or something, and I remember staying up late to try to watch those shows at 10 o'clock at night and falling asleep inevitably during Aeon Flux or whatever, trying to watch it.
Yeah. No, it's that
Flux,
liquid television was absolutely, that would open basically the American market to more adult animation, and then the network follow suit down the line. You know?
So, Hervé, you made like really your name in the animation industry during your years during the in Japan, during the time to be in Japan, the late 80s, the incredible boom years, and then carried that on into your time at working with Deke in LA after that. At what point did you sort of make the transition into taking on the role of a producer? And I think NOA was established in the early 90s, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah. 1991, 16th of April.
91.
Yeah, 91. I mean, it's just a progression. You go from one job to the next, and you go up and up and up and up until you get your Peter principle. And after working as an artistic director in LA and really made a big, it was successful. Super Mario was successful. By the way Andy Hayward was successful is that he would come and see the staff, check the artistic direction, if he liked the original drawings, then we would go in production, and then he would come back with the Nelson ratings at the end. If you had good ratings, then you were a good producer or artistic director, and they would hire you again. If you had bad ratings, you were out.
Whoa.
It's a pretty straightforward. But Super Mario, we had so little amount of budget that usually you had designer for props, character model, prop character backgrounds. And in Super Mario, we didn't have the money for that. So the same designer designed prop character and background, which was very different than what other people used to do. And it made it a little bit special, but it was a lot of work. I had to do stand still on my head to just get the blood down in my brain, because otherwise you would too much work.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was let's say you got 25 people and you have to spend at least half an hour with each of them, and it's all about artwork. So the amount of focus you need is so great. It's so demanding that, and I'm not such a good artist myself, not enough to be competing with the people in LA, which are all more or less the top artists in the United States, so that's why I ended up, more or less, to answer your question, that's why I moved slowly towards artistic direction, which is more a job, an administration job, is to make sure that you're a good link between the producers who talks money and the artist who talks quality. You have to deal between the two, and you end up being a producer basically on that side of the line instead of on the artistic side of the line. So after LA, I decided, well, let's go open a studio in Vancouver, because it was beside LA, so I could get all the subcontract from Warner Brothers, from Colossal Pictures, from MGM. We did Pink Panther, Batman, Back to the Future, well, we did a lot of subcontract for.
And how would you describe like just the scene of animation production in Vancouver at that time?
Well, when I arrived, there was less than 20 animators in Vancouver.
Like individual animators.
In the whole city,
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I had to bring in my entire crew. So I brought people I brought some director from France, from Japan. I brought a lot of people from Philippines. My first crew was 12 Filipinos because we had to bring everything in, to the point where we were able, when later on, when we started producing series, we made an association, of producer, because there was nobody at the beginning. There was a few guys doing little animation on the corner, Delaney, and that's about it. Jan Friedman was just doing a few little jobs here and there. And then it more or less at the same time I arrived, Studio B started, and I started, and we decided, well, let's go for it. And we built the industry, and we moved it to 2,000 animators at some point, and two or three studios teaching animation, and Vancouver Art School. We provided all the teachers for those places. We really built the whole thing through the association also of all the producers of animation. We managed to change the law in BC so we could hire people without having to hire foreign people without having to go through the process of publicity and the whole Canada, blah, 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 blah.
Really? That was your company specifically that drove that change?
Well, my company and a few other, Studio B, Bardell, me, and Jan Friedman, we were 4 or 5 little companies. And we definitely went right through it because I wanted to produce. I'm the first one to produce a TV series. Billy the Cat was the first TV series in BC. It was, so it was the first co-production. Yeah, it was the first of everything. I mean, we were pioneering in BC. We were pioneering the whole industry.
I mean, the thing that I found in doing research for the DVD and then the Blu-ray was that you were remembered by people who work with you as like super fondly, and that the fact that you brought a lot of great projects and like a lot of work for people to Canada up there, and that like that's the thing time and again people would say to me is that they they love working with you and that they want to work with you again. So I just sort of, so when you say that just sort of reminds me of like how many people said that to me when I was researching for the DVD and Blu-ray, that oh yeah, he was a wonderful to work with, and just like they would love to work with you again.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was all about the spirit of doing things. It was not really about making money. I don't care about money. I don't want money anyway. It's just a pain in the butt money, or stuff in general. So the least you have, the best you are, because you're free. You can just move around quickly, and we were understanding. I say we because it's still a studio. It's still other people relating satellite around, blah blah blah. But basically, I mean, we enjoy being artists. And just go for the art itself, and that's why I'm so fond of Cybersix, because it's probably one of the best handmade TV series.
I would still say it is one of the best looking television shows ever produced.
For sure.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
But before we get into Cybersix too much, there were just a couple of things I was curious about the early years of NOA. So I know Billy the Cat came out in 96, and we
Yeah.
can talk a little about that as well. Was there anything else that NOA was working on before that, or was it just like a long run to sort of get that one show off the ground?
No, it was all those service jobs. We had a whole whack of service job. Like I was mentioning, Pink Panther, MGM had opened his animation branch, and it was what was his name? A guy from Toronto actually was running that show. His name will come back. And so we got contract for doing pre-production for Pink Panther, which was a great show. We got Batman with the first series of animation of Batman with Warner Brothers. We got Colossal Picture in San Francisco. Colossal did the Aeon Flux was from Colossal, but they did also Back to the Future. So we had jobs for that. We had work for some Deke show. LA needed people to do pre-production, and Studio B, Bardell, NOA, we were all getting our work from LA, from Los Angeles, basically, from the studio down there. And so, yeah, a whole series of subcontract. And
Yeah.
and every trade show we're at MIP in Cannes, in France, in the fall,
Yeah.
MIP TV and MIPCOM. And I would go to the MIP, bring a little bit my portfolio, the studio portfolio, and try to get rack some work. And then I bump into Steve Walsh, who had Eva Production, and he was producing in Europe, and he had 5 studio, one in Germany, Cologne Cartoon in Germany, and Serial in Wales, and Les Films du Triangle in France, and Sophie Duck in Belgium, because in Europe, if you had to regroup, if you would get money if you had many countries together. And he was an executive producer, so it was one way of making money, but he was always short. So he came and knocked on NOA's door in Vancouver at some point. After meeting me, he came and knocked because he had made a contact with a money source. What was their name? Anyway, the BC Film of the time, the TV station of the time, the owner. And so he needed a studio in Vancouver to get that money. And that's how NOA came in the picture for Billy the Cat, basically. But meanwhile, we was doing subcontract work from just to pay for the bill and keep the people a little bit.
And I know with both Billy the Cat and Cybersix, there was this element of just finding a property that you could build into, not just a television show, but like a greater sort of franchise. And these two shows came from very different sources. And I'm just wondering how you sort of came. Obviously, Cybersix is a much more in-depth story than I suspect Billy the Cat was, because stumbling on a bande dessinée property is not anything too unusual for an animated show from that period. But I mean, how did you get into doing Billy the Cat at NOA, and then how did your approach change when you looked into something like Cybersix?
Yeah. Well, Billy the Cat, like I just mentioned, it's Steve Walsh from Eva had those 5 studio, and the idea was for each studio to bring a property to the table to produce a property for the 5 of them. So they all produced little show, and then the guy in and Pierre Levy in Belgium had access to Dupuis, the comic book producer, big, huge comic book producer, and he made a deal with them to do the TV series. So Eva ended up with a big project, Billy the Cat, and that's how Steve needed a partner in Canada to get 25% of the budget, while he gets 75% through all his countries in Europe. Billy, by the way, Billy the Cat, the author of Billy the Cat, were traveling. The author, the writer, was traveling in Africa, and he saw all those kids who didn't have any parents, any home. And that's what gave him the idea of making Billy the Cat, which is a little boy in the skin of a cat. So basically unable to be a little boy anymore and be stuck to try to live as a cat. So there is a little bit of depth, but obviously, not like Cybersix, not the same existential problem. But there is a little bit of depth because you need a little bit of depth to make a project substantial.
Yeah, I haven't read the Billy the Cat comic. I know it had a little bit of a darker edge than the animated show wound up having.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
to say the least.
The problem is always the broadcaster wants you to bring it really for kid level, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, and you had so many, in Billy the Cat, you have 5 broadcasters, 5 producers, 5 of everything, 5, all the financial partner, everybody reads the script. Can you imagine the zoo?
Wow.
The zoo of, and we were in charge of Canadian to get funding. You need to produce half the scripts and the other half we produce in France, actually, with English writers. So it was such a complicated. The people at Telefilm and CAFCO who were approving, they were saying, a real saga. Billy the Cat, because it's so complicated,
And was Teletoon the English broadcaster who was attached at that point, or were they not in the picture yet?
They were not in the picture. It was just before Teletoon. It was
okay, yeah.
It was the English side. It was Canal Famille in French, and on the English it was, I don't remember actually. Well, it will come back. Yeah, Teletoon came just a couple years later. Mostly because CNR, who was really flying high, wanted to have their own.
Yep.
Their own.
Flying high for sure.
By the way, I started the studio of CNR. They got me from LA, and I went.
Oh, so you were one of the initial founders of
not
that
founder,
not a founder, but one of the first people involved.
Yeah, because CNR was 2 distributors, Weinberg, and Michelin were married, and they were distributing, but eventually they wanted to produce, and they tried to start. They got Weinberg. I'm forgetting all the names. Sorry, Weinberg and friends at the famous toy company Fisher Price, and so he had money to produce a show, and he couldn't get it off the ground at the script and storyboard level. And they got me involved. They spotted me in LA. They got me to Montreal, and they say, okay, can you get that going? And I present to them the structure of how you produce TV series in Los Angeles, So they put me in charge of the favorite song that I think was the first show. And I had to open 2 studios in Japan to produce that series because it was too late in the process. Get storyboard artists, get all the crew that came from LA and France, because in Montreal there was not people available, to do all the pre-production. So that year I basically got them. It went over budget, and they lost Fisher Price. So with Ron Weinberg, with Ron, we took the plane, we flew down to LA, and we went to Fox to see a lady there who was a friend of Ron, and she put the few $1 million missing and took a share of CNR as a collateral, and that's how CNR started its production. So then again, I was in Japan overseeing that production, blah, blah, blah. And then I opened my studio in a way in Vancouver after CNR. That's true. I did CNR in between. Yeah.
Wow. Like, what haven't you done?
Yeah, you had your hand in everything from my
You know?
childhood, it seems like.
It's
Yeah.
so funny.
Well, I don't know. You just run around. I mean, life is long, huh? If you don't sit on your chair.
For sure.
You do a lot of stuff if you keep moving, type of thing. Anyway, whatever. And then, well, in a way, and then Billy the Cat, and then I wanted to produce more than just Billy the Cat, and it was complicated with Europe, and I had opened a good connection right off the bat. By the way, you were asking, how we if there was people in Vancouver to work and stuff like that. Well, there was not enough, that's for sure. So I had called one of guy I was working with at Michael Mills when I was doing commercials at Michael Mills, Carlos Barato, and he was in Argentina, and he came over. He was Canadian from marriage. He came over, and he gave me the connection with Argentina to do subcontracting work. And it was really interesting because they had a sort of one company in LA was basically keeping all the subcontract to Argentina for itself. They had sort of blocked anybody to go in, and I was able to squeeze in and give them something else than working for that company at a better cost. And so they were very happy to connection. So we did a lot of work with those people, and they were really good artists. Argentinian are really good artists because they still learn the traditional drawing skills, a little bit like in the time of Academy and all those days. So if you notice how Cybersix, the design of the character is very different than the Belgian, for example, school or the American bubbly type of character. I mean, Batman was interesting because Bruce was the designer of the original Batman Very Dark series, and against, let's say you draw an arm against the bubbles on one side, you're going to have a straight line on the other side. Meanwhile, if you look at other production, Marvel, it's bubble on both sides of the muscles. So it gave to Batman a really sharp edge, the original animation TV series.
The Batman the Animated Series from the early '90s. Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, like that. Yeah.
Bruce Timm, exactly. So we did quite a few shows in the beginning, the pre-production of a lot of those shows, and the layouts and stuff, and it was the first series of Warner Brother was reopening their animation studio, and we got in a big fight with them anyway.
Fight over what?
Over one of the director was completely anal about sexuality, and it's funny to say that.
Really?
It's really funny. That's a great way of wording it.
Yes.
So
bravo.
So we had some layout where Batman walks at night, and his flashlight is at the level of his hips, and he had put a big X on the paper and rip the drawing itself and ship it back to us in Vancouver to redo it because it was a sexual innuendo.
Oh my God.
So
And did he just draw a big X over like
over
the
but you know
flashlight that looked like
those
a
layouts
penis?
is layout is the background, and then you got the character, all the poses of the character, and we were doing even the shading on the layouts, you know. So,
Wow.
right, those were really big drawing, and we were paid $25 per layout.
Oh my God.
And
Batman
sometime,
looks too sexy.
Wow.
and sometime there was a scene where there was 25 paper in a row just to do it. It's a big train sequence right at the beginning of one of the first show of that series. Big train sequence without a cut. So it goes on and on and on. You know, $25. There's more paper than $25 of paper in there. So and eventually I went down to LA with all that stuff. And it was basically a director's show where there was 4 directors and they were all competing to have the most original scenes and approach to the storyboard type of thing, to the action. So you had a scene, a 360-degree scene. You know, that's a lot of drawing to do if you know. Anyway, so eventually that when that director ripped the drawing, my director, which was a French rugby player, French guy, wanted to take the plane and knock the teeth out of the guy. I said, okay, I'll go. I'll go over there and I'll ask for some apologies, you know. So I did get a letter from Warner, an apology letter, 1 paragraph out of 3 pages, and the rest of the letter was things we did bad.
Oh my God.
And then, well, the spirit of that relationship was out. You know, we would say, okay, well, let's cancel that whole relationship. And then Warner was so scared they didn't work in Vancouver for 2 years. Scared the shit out of them.
That's so funny.
Anyway,
Don't mess with rugby players. That's the takeaway. Huh?
yeah, don't mess with the rugby
Yeah.
players. Like, anyway, you know,
Oh,
and
God.
sometimes, I didn't want to. I would have done it another way to keep the diplomacy going. You know, I had learned diplomacy doing supervision in Asia because you can never say to a Japanese that he's wrong. You can never say to a Chinese that he's wrong because they're going to lose the face and they cannot lose the face. So you have to find ways to do. And that's another reason why they were hiring Canadians to supervise in Japan because we're way more diplomatic. Anyway, whatever. I mean, you have to deal all sort of ways to make sure that it's not that you're not too bold because otherwise they're going to back off, right? But to go back to your original question about the different approach, so Billy the Cat was a big, huge European co-production, with tons of people, and it went on and on and on. Meanwhile, Cybersix came from that relationship I had with the studio in Argentina. At some point, I asked Carlos to ask his friends over there. Well, Miglia was actually working on job like Batman and if they had any production, because I was looking for when you go to MIP or those places, you come with a series of ideas, pitch Bible, 5 pages, character, character, the design, the concept of the series, a few ideas, blah blah blah. So you have your little portfolio of ideas. So when you meet broadcasters or other potential co-producer, you have stuff to show. Hey, what do you think of this idea? What do you think of that idea? And so I wanted material to present, and that's when they send me that little book of Cybersix. That
And
little.
sorry, just to clarify, Carlos Meglia was involved with Batman the Animated Series?
Well,
and he's the artist of Cybersix, just to clarify for anyone listening who's not aware.
My connection was Oscar Saavedra over there, and Oscar was telling me that sometimes he asked Carlos to work on. He would give to Carlos some layouts and stuff like that to do because they needed money, So I'm not sure at what point Oscar worked, but or Back to the Future, or Batman, or Pink Panther, he would have Carlos would have worked on some of those shows.
I mean, artists need work, and when that's the work
I hear
you've got,
that.
you take it. Like I mean,
That makes
exactly,
perfect sense.
exactly.
But he was a parallel presence to a lot of what you had already been working on at that point, basically.
Well,
not direct, but
I mean the interesting thing about Cybersix too is that what I've read is some of the Japanese producers wanted to make their own sort of Batman the animated series as well. I mean, they had also TMS had animated Batman as well, so like they had their people that had worked on that to work on Cybersix as well. From what I've seen,
I would think so because TMS obviously was always looking for subcontracting work, So when I was working in LA, that's how we would give to TMS usually the trailers, stuff that has a little bit more quality kind of thing, and a little bit better budget. Because when the budget was low, we had to use different. We had to use Cuckoo's Nest in Taiwan. We had to use all the Koreans studio that were cheaper. So that's how I met for the first time in DEEK in Tokyo. I met Koji Takeuchi, who was a little bit the head of production in TMS. And then when I was working as an artistic director in LA, I worked with Richard Reynes, and Richard got me as artistic director on a project to work with TMS, which was called Little Nemo, the story of Slumberland. Little Nemo?
Yeah, that's actually another title that we put out on at Discotheque. So I'm very familiar with it. Yeah.
Have you seen the trailer done by Miyazaki on Little Nemo?
Yeah, the pilots, quote unquote. There were a couple of early things, and Miyazaki did one of them.
Yeah. And that's when
they're quite something. Yeah.
And at that point, the guy who was running TMS was called the Black Spider, and he drank a lot, etc. Whatever. And Miyazaki got into a big fight with him, and he said, "I'm going to teach you how to do movies." And he went and opened his studio, Ghibli.
Oh my God!
That was right after Little Nemo. After he did the promo for Little Nemo.
Oh wow!
That's it. So anyway, so at that point, I'm with Richard Reynes in LA, and we're dealing with TMS to do another promo for Little Nemo, a new promo, in the hope of doing a co-production United States and Japan for Little Nemo. And that's when Koji Takeuchi was working there and doing a little bit the thing on pre-production material. So we met again. And I don't remember at what time before or after, because I was still going to Japan here and there. But we had to do a karaoke night as usual. And by the way, in Japan, they were saying, if you want to be a director, you need to be able to sing.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Because if you don't control your own voice, how can you control people?
That makes perfect sense.
Wow.
Yeah. That is such a uniquely like Japanese corporate way of sort of
Oh my God, that's so
sort of
funny.
coming to that conclusion. Yeah.
It's really funny. So anyway, I'm in Japan. I'm in a karaoke bar. I go up there and I choose a song, and Koji, after that, he was also in the bar, got really pissed because it was his song. So I'd stolen his song.
What song was it?
I don't remember the title, but basically it was "Wala Timoto Baby da 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 bam bam." You know, la 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 la. Could you? Oishi, so sweet. It was a mix English Japanese. I tried to find it back. I couldn't find it.
Oh my God, yes.
No, it's
Gotta
like
know.
forget it. Anyway, it was popular in the 80s, end of the 80s. So anyway, all this I'm mentioning Koji because later on I'm in NAPTI. I had done my little Bible of Cybersix to present, and I bumped NatP was in it's in the state NatP, and I bump into Koji, and he looked at it and said, "Hey, can I get a copy?" I said, "Yeah, sure, take a copy." And a week later, he said, "Hey, TMS wants to co-produce it." You know.
So that's the point that TMS got involved was through that connection.
Through
Okay.
that connection through Koji. Yeah.
Oh, see, we've never heard. I don't think any sources ever said that exactly. Like that's how.
Yeah, there have been multiple accounts of how this all came together, and
Oh my God.
they do not line up with that. But this makes perfect sense.
This makes more sense than everything we've ever read about this.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you need to have to do production with the Japanese, or you need to have a human connection. It takes a long time before they're gonna accept to work with you. So you have to visit and come back and visit and come back. You know, it's never the first day type of thing. So you need to have that kind of connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to participate in their culture as well, right?
Yeah, well, they need to trust you. It's a question of trust. Who are you? I mean, most people are in the business are con artists. So you have to be trustful. Anyway, so it's true, Koji, and Koji was in charge of TMS, and quite often TMS was just producing series after series after series, and quite often it was subcontract. It was never their own production. And he wanted, and he had his artists who wanted to do something of their own,
Yeah, TMS, as I'm sure Brady knows more about this than me, but they always really wanted to break out with an international hit, and a lot of the subcontracting work they had done up to that point was all just sort of building up to that. That's sort of the impression I've always gotten.
I think it's a mixture of, on the administration level, yeah, they were at that point, and on the studio, they really wanted to do something of their own, a little bit their own, and they adopted Cybersix as their own creation, in a sense. The artists put such beautiful energy on Cybersix that you never seen in other shows of TMS,
I mean,
There was
it's going on all cylinders. Like if you look at the animation in it, just the amount of stuff that's animated on 2s and 1s in it is absolutely like mind blowing compared to anything else, maybe other than Batman on TV at the time, right? Like there's so much animation on the screen that it's crazy that this was a weekly cartoon show.
Yeah. No, it's really out of. I mean, the budget was huge, also. So because they did.
It's amazing how the animators just go for broke and just try to work in every set piece they've ever wanted to do in a show, and then they just string it all together into this each episode. That's what the whole show is. It's always a joy to watch.
It's a very it's a beautiful show. They really had fun doing that one. I mean, they were really happy of doing it. I mean, it's too bad. I mean, that financially it didn't work, but that's okay.
And just in terms of the story Bible that you had put together, and I'm just curious. I know that they had sent you a copy of the comic, and I'm curious to know, what is it that made you realize that the potential of Cybersix to be adapted into an animated show? Because this is a comic that I don't think a lot of people would look at this and think of it as something that could be turned into an animated show for any audience. It's like a lot of South American comics. It's very graphic. It's explicit. What is it that convinced you that it could work?
Oh, well, first of all, it's a very solid. You got all the element to have a solid story. The cyborg that alone, blah 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 blah. The whole Bible is really really solid as a compared to other show like that kids show type of thing where not much is happening in the backstory. This is such a rich backstory that you can see right away how to go from there and go into hundreds of different directions. Plus, the artwork is just beautiful. The design, I mean, I love the Argentinian design compared to other type of design. I mean,
it's like nothing else.
You look at even in Cybersix, they kept all the main character. They kept exactly the Argentinian design, and then when you get into all the incidental character, they fall right into the typical Japanese type of designs of character. It's amazing how every culture has their own set of how design should be. Or what they understand in design. It's a sort of it's like a window through the world through a certain design, and I thought that it's one of the best type of design as far as I'm concerned for animation, 2D animation. Didn't work that great for 3D, but 2D was perfect.
I always just found it so interesting because there's also that Argentinian live action series, and a number of episodes of that have become uncovered, and it's awful. But what's interesting about it is that the TV series just sort of revels in the kind of surface level vulgarity that you see in the comic.
Yeah.
But the animated series, it seems like it's able to look past that element of it and just find like a sort of a deeper beauty and thematic resonance that the TV series just skips over completely.
Well, the pathos of the main character and her struggle of having to keep herself a secret and all of that is completely it's in the comics, but it's sort of with all this other window dressing of the really vulgar stuff, right? Whereas the cartoon really sort of captures that journey of Cybersix struggling with, am I human or am I a monster? All those themes, which are really like beautifully explored in a lot of the episodes, like Terra and whatnot, right? Like there's there's a lot more heartfelt, I feel, in the cartoon show, which I honestly feel as much as I find the original comic interesting, I think the cartoon is the better adaptation. Like that's to me the one. Like, and I might have my opinion colored by the fact that like it's what I watched when I was a little kid, right? So, but at the same time, I think that it sort of distilled the nuance of that character down, like beautifully, personally.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I mean, to sell the comic book, they had to put all that nudity and etc. Because it was the main selling point, really, for Miglia and Grigio, and
Yeah, that's what I find interesting about a lot of the South American comics is that they will be filled with things that are like very offensive, or as we see even in Cybersix with like racist caricatures and stuff. But that doesn't really represent their views on people or the ideas that they're really trying to convey. There is an actual humanity and empathy behind everything. And again, that's what the TV show is able to capture.
Yeah, we kept
the animated
also,
series.
Also, we wanted to. I mean, the Japanese insisted to make it for kids, so we had to take all that, all the nudity had to go out right away, and also the vampire aspect had to also be negotiated.
Yeah, I found it interesting. Like, and a lot of what we talked about finding like the really core humane elements of the comic. You see that going back to the pitch and production documents. That it just even then it's distilling everything very well. And when you trace back all the interviews and reports and everything about the show going back, it seems like the vampirism element, from what I read of it, it seemed like you guys were trying to keep that in, but it was like the last big compromise.
Yeah, because it's so dramatic. Let's put it this way. It's so compelling that you have to be vampiring to survive. I thought it was a really strong point. Meanwhile,
like,
they didn't want to scare the kids.
Yeah, exactly. Like what they came up with the tube of sustenance. It's very creative, but you do learn you do sort of lose that visceral element.
Absolutely.
That was very prominent in the original comic, and it's kind of lost in general. Like I know that Cybersix is better for being less graphic, but the original has this very kind of organic, almost sort of Cronenberg idea of technology that kind of gets lost. Like you never really get a sense of what Von Richter's creations are or how he makes them, whereas the comic delves into very explicit detail of what that is. But there's a lot is implied in the animated show, which makes it stronger in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to say everything.
Now, is TMS's the animation studios want of it being for kids, and like your side sort of wanting to do a more adult show? Is that sort of why there's sort of like that? It feels like it's more for teens instead of kids, but not for adults even. Like I think
teen or adult is about the same thing in terms of rating. Yeah.
Because like it feels like the show came out a little more towards the middle, I guess, like where it's not like a super kiddie show, but it's like just a level under what we would see as like an adult animated cartoon right now, right? Like it sort of straddles that line, I think.
Yeah. It's the advantage to do it with Japan, who is way more permissive in terms of audience for kids. They can show way more stuff than in America.
Mm.
And that way the show was sort of a little bit too geared a little older or more permissive in a sense than if we had done it for but we had problems selling it to the States. They didn't bite into it at all. I was surprised, but whatever.
Well, I mean, for me, I was in the States. It only aired for a couple months, and then they canceled it around episode 10 or something like that. They just replaced it with Digimon, and we never got to see it. And for me, years later, I was a graphic artist. I would do packaging and all that sort of stuff. And I started with this company, Discotech, which I work with now. I was introduced to the owner, and he said I had asked him to work on a certain project. And he's like, "Well, I have this other thing. Do you think you could do it?" And it was Cybersix. And I was like, "Oh man, I remember this when I was a kid. Yes, I want to work on this." And then I sort of talked him into letting me produce the DVD. It was one of my very first projects, like 10 years ago, and just remembering, like, oh, I wanted to see the ending of this.
Oh yeah.
And so that's
funny.
why, like, I remember he sent me all the master video files for it. And I remember being excited to watch the last episodes because we didn't get them. And this is not a show that really, while it re-aired on Teletoon for a long time, it never re-aired here. And it was never, before our release, it never got an English DVD release either. So it's just something I lucked into, and wanting to see the ending was like so exciting to me because we stopped on the it was like the werewolf episode, I think it was. Was the last one that we got in America. And
I think it was the greatest show in Meridiana.
Oh, was it that one? Okay.
Yeah.
It was one. It was like close. It was around there, or maybe they skipped because they skipped
they skipped a few.
They skipped the Hashimoto one, and they skipped another one, I believe, and they kind of like edited it down, but it was more or less all together. But it was just a weird thing. Like we never got the where she goes to confront Von Richter and all that, and I was so excited to see that. And yeah, I guess, and that's the thing with Fox at the time too, is if it did not perform immediately gangbusters, they would take it off and just put reruns of what would have more ratings on, which is unfortunate because it never let a show like this grow into whatever it could have become,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, it's too bad. Yeah.
Going back, there's a couple more things I wanted to
Go for it.
clarify about the development. So you traveled to Buenos Aires to meet the Carloses, from my understanding.
Yeah.
Is this correct? And there's a story about how you had offered $1 for them to hold the rights for you while you developed the series. Is this also true?
I might have offered $1, but I had to give them a little bit more. If I
okay,
remember.
so it wound up being more than $1. Could you tell more about your journey to Buenos Aires?
Well, it was a fairly straightforward. I mean, I did speak a little bit of Spanish, so that was good because those guys were not strong English speaker. And so I went to see my co-producer, Oscar Saavedra, and we went to see them, and they offered me a big meal at the restaurant, where you have the big steak about an inch thick, and and I had such a fever, I couldn't eat at all. So it was a really very difficult moment at the beginning, Anyway, I got a doggy bag for the steak. And
at least you got to have some of that steak, because I would have been very upset if I went all the way there and couldn't eat the steak. Oh my god!
It was. Yeah. You're trying not to insult people and all that kind of stuff. That's why I'm talking about those things, because that's what's more important than the rest. Type of thing. Meanwhile, dealing with them, strong that I was a good friend with Oscar Saavedra, who knew them very well, that they kind of trust me, because it's a big thing to give So I have brought an option agreement, all the contracts, and or we ship the contract later. And there was a $10,000 option fee in there that was paid. I'm not sure if I'm the one who paid it or I got it for $1 until I get a co-producer, and then we would pay the option fee. Could have been that deal too, because you need to have the rights before being able to shop for it. type of thing to present it everywhere else. So I guess I got it for $1. And then I told them, if I get a bite, within the year, I'll get you the $10,000 right away. Maybe something like that. Because I didn't have $10,000. I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean,
winning
that's just the story that's gone around in some of the interviews and stuff with the Carloses and stuff from like our archival interviews we've read. So we were curious like how true it was. Like obviously it makes sense that like it wasn't just for $1 forever, but like
No.
Yeah.
No. And option is always for a reduced time, because if you're unable to do with it, and production are hot potatoes, you have to get rid of it at the time. They don't last. There's always a time for bringing things out, and so that you never get an option for 10 years. You get an option for 1 year, and that's more or less. And then you can renew your option, renew. So obviously, I made sure that it wasn't for a long period of time. And I think, not sure if they had tried it before, because obviously they got a TV series done in Argentina, so they did sell the option for that.
And I understand they were quite disappointed with how that turned out.
Yeah.
So they may have been gun shy too.
Yeah. And when they saw the promo that we did with TMS, the trailer.
Yeah, that's amazing.
They say, will all the animation be like that? And I say, yeah. Oh my God. They were really flabbergasted by it.
I mean, one of the few cartoons you can say that looks like the pilot promo animation.
Yeah.
The whole time.
That's one of those things too, when working on the Blu-ray, that I discovered that existed, and I got them TMS to find the master tape for me. So that is on the Blu-ray that we did, is that promo animation, which is really cool. Like it's got like some of the stuff with the drill and everything, like the drill dozer and everything is like just amazing, like mind blowing looking in that promo.
Yeah. No, it was a great promo. It's like, if you ever find the Little Nemo promo, also there's a couple really nice ones there too that they did TMS. They have good animators there. They have really good people. Well, one of the oldest studio in Japan with Mushi, 1948. I think TMS.
Still going too.
Was interesting. The building where you got the first floor is all the paint and trace, and then the second floor is all the animator and in-betweener, and the third floor is all the directors and pre-production people, and every floor you climb in the company, you climb the ladder in the company, and you have to take your shoes off when you go in.
The development documents for the show, the Bible, which if I don't know if we explicitly said this earlier, but if you have the Blu-ray release and you pop that Blu-ray into a Blu-ray disc player on a computer, you can download the documents. They're all there, and you can see them that way, and it's very interesting to browse through it and just see how this all started. So did you put that all together yourself?
Well, I had put a Bible, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. The Japanese, after that, Koji redid a Bible.
Oh, right. Okay.
From his point of view. And then we corrected the Bible back and forth type of thing. I let them do, once they got involved, we sort of split the work. I let them do more or less all the drawing on his side, because he had all the artists that were going to the show itself. They were going to do it in-house. There was no subcontracting. So therefore, it was better to let the artists over there do the work, because it would be all the same,
And I'm curious to know more about how you had all this going on the Japanese side with TMS, how the Canadian side of the production was built. I know there are people from NOA who carried over from Billy the Cat, including Judy Vallee and Barry Whitaker.
Yeah.
Terry
And
Klassen as well.
Terry Klassen, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's little amount of writers in Vancouver. And when you do a co-production, an offshore co-production, you need to do 50% of the scripts, or all the scripts in this case. We did all the scripts for Cybersix. So we had to reuse whoever was available in Vancouver. They need to be Canadian, if possible from BC. And we could not hire Americans. So that's how the studio used its own NOA, reuse the same people.
I still find it amazing that you were able to get funding on the Canadian side for this project as well, and I still find it, for broadcast purposes with Teletoon and everything, how this is a show that by our Canadian standards counts as Canadian content, 100% Canadian content for broadcasting, and yet absolutely none of the actual animation work was done in Canada.
Yeah.
Everything, all of it was done in Japan. I still find it almost feels like you gamed the system in a way.
Well,
with this production.
Well, Cybersix was a little bit special. It was on the Canadian side, it was a real financial fiasco. Let's put it this way, because
that makes sense.
Because Madeleine Lévesque at Teletoon, who is in charge of acquiring original production, had said she would come in, and then she said she's not coming in. And that was just a week before Koji wanted to start production. And Koji runs a big studio over there. I don't know how many people in TMS, but at least 300 or 400 probably. And the schedule is fundamental. So there was a decision to be made last minute. And therefore, I couldn't, not having the Canadian broadcaster in acquisition, I cannot build any financial structure. I cannot go see BC Film. I cannot go see private. I could go see private people. I was dealing with Alliance Atlantis, but they were really slow and not that interested because they're in Toronto. I'm in Vancouver, and Firestone J was doing a lot of other shows, way more interesting movies and stuff. Animation was not high on their list of Alliance Atlantis. So basically, Koji offers to lend me 600,000 or whatever was missing in my financial structure, and that's how we started the show. I started with very little amount of Canadian funding and a lot of Japanese funding that I had to pay back. And to make it Canadian content, at the beginning it was a 25/75 co-production, and now we reduce it to 20/80, which is the minimal amount for a Canadian co-production. And then you got all those rules to do a co-production. There's about 12 points. You have to be your own producer. You have to spend 20% of the budget in Canada. You have to own the property. You have to be, and then you have a certain amount of. You have to make the sound. You need to have, out of the list of 10 points, you need to hit 6 or 7. Scripts is one. Music is one. Post-production.
But for an animated show, none of the actual animation has to be done. You can do all these other things in Canada to get the funding.
You need to do, I think, well, if you skip animation, then you need to do something else, story editing or whatever, I don't remember exactly all those, the points, but we just sort of wheel and deal, type of thing, to make sure that we could get the Canadian content out of it.
So Teletoon was, because they didn't show up, Teletoon was not initially involved when the production
No,
took off,
no.
but they did get involved again later. Is that correct?
Well, after that, I just sold it to as I don't remember. There's two names. One year they participate in the development of the series and everything. The other one, they just buy the show. So when I met Teletoon, the buyer of the regular show, she said, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna buy that one," and she bought it. But then,
So Teletoon's development side, or the
yeah,
sort of the department they use for developing shows, they did not participate, but they ultimately purchased it as an acquisition.
Yeah, exactly.
Later.
I was wrong with my term acquisition. Yeah, so,
right.
Because when they develop the show,
that's interesting.
but when they develop the show, they have to put something like 20% of the budget, at least 20%, and then BC Film or Telefilm or whoever else can come in. If you don't have a broadcaster putting that amount of money in the show, the Telefilm of this world cannot come in. So you lose all those investments, and it's hard to get even private investment if you don't have a broadcaster. Because they say, well, if you don't have a broadcaster, it's going to sit on the shelf. And obviously, if you don't have a broadcaster and the show is not broadcast, you cannot get Canadian content. It needs to be broadcast. So not getting a broadcaster up front was the big major problem with Cybersix.
That's kind of amazing that you were able to bring this show together without a broadcaster on board, and then Teletoon just sort of came in after and acquired the show. Anyway, I thought they were involved in the production. And wow, okay, that makes
they got after, and I had to wait about 2 years before being able to certify it as Canadian content. And it's Teletoon who put the pressure on me, because they say, well, I'm going to cancel Cybersix, and I think they had Billy or whatever, something else, if you don't certify the production. I say, okay. And now I had to really go on my knee to get Telefilm and CAFCO to certify the production. That was that was difficult, but we got it. So we got the certification eventually. But it was done, and then obviously with the financial structure all up in the air, I couldn't give back all the money to. So I still owe a lot of money to TMS, and they didn't make a lot of money, because I remember they say, "Yeah, we just clear it from the books and keep going." And they're not. TMS is really not a good co-producer when it comes to co-producing TV series internationally, because they don't. A little bit like the Americans. They don't. How could I say? Courtship. They don't courtship the broadcasters, the foreign broadcasters. They sit in their booth, they produce a show, and the broadcaster have to go see them, not them going to see the broadcasters. Like on Billy the Cat, we sold it in over 90 countries. But Cybersix, I mean, they got an initial sale for, I think, Germany, France, definitely France, and Canada, obviously, Japan.
Yeah, there's like a French version, there's a Spanish version, German, Japanese, and English, from what I could find.
Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah, and that's the impression I've sort of gotten from like France, Belgium co-productions, is that they're very focused on getting it into as many countries as possible, whereas in Japan, even with a company that has such that has big international aspirations like TMS, it's the way that they produce things is so insular.
Yeah.
In comparison, because they're just not used to doing it that way. They're used to having production committees which are built around, again, this shared risk and just having these unique connections that make the productions happen. And Cybersix in many ways seems like a weird fusion of the two. You have you're maintaining relationships in a way that's kind of similar to how these production committees are built in Japan, but you're trying to do it in a way that's going to make a big international co-production, which in some ways doesn't work and kind of didn't, because it didn't get to, as many countries as I think, again, something like a France, Belgium co-production would. But it still produces an amazing product in the end, in the same way.
The same way. I mean, I went for the quality of the product, basically, and getting it done. And mostly also to get the option money to Miglia and Trijo, because they got 10,000 US per episode, and we bought 26 episodes. So that was the bonanza for them. That was,
they were very happy with the final product as well, I understand.
Yeah, they were very happy with the product, but I think to get that money, when those guys have so much problem financially over there, right away, when they got the financing, when we bought it, right away, Miglia went and moved his family to Barcelona, because suddenly he had the money to get out of Argentina, who is always Argentina, to follow their history.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So you guys had purchased 26 episodes, but only 13 were created. Was there any actual production on the second season, or did it just end at the 13 and then they still got their money anyway?
No, we might have some ideas for scripts and stuff like that. A little bit of writing material, but we didn't start any pre-prod or anything like that.
I've always been curious what the writing would. I mean, I sort of always been kind of curious what the second season would have been about if it had happened.
Well, knowing TMS, who wanted to, first of all, they were very happy that we can use their type of monsters, because they've been used to work with the American, who are way more rigid on their own market. The American always do things for their market. So, they want to have their actor, they want to have Harry Potter American, they want, name it. So being able to do their own monster gave them that sort of, yes. So I have the feeling that the second series would have been maybe a little bit the same, where you would have a lot of the monster coming from the Japanese, and we might have to strong the success and the ratings, and because it was really, wherever it went, it got high ratings, except in the States. Strong with that, I think we would have been able to move it a little bit towards more psychological problem, a little bit more. It would have been interesting. It would have been interesting. Yep. But the power, they had all the power, so it would have been Japanese monsters, most probably.
I mean, all the monsters in the first season were awesome anyway, so that sounds like it would have been awesome.
Yeah.
But there's one thing the author was telling me of Cybersix, that Cybersix was a container in which all sort of stories can happen. So I don't know if you notice at some point when in the story of Cybersix, when the angels, Michael and Gabriel, the angels are reincarnated on Earth, and one is a female and the other one is a male, and they fall in love towards each other. Well, that story, they had produced this, and they had gave me the character models and the the sort of the Bible for a Gabriel story, that they would have liked to pull from Cybersix. So, strong of that, we might have tried to convince the Japanese to introduce strong character like that, angels and demons, and you know.
That would have been an interesting backdoor pilot to have in season 2, would be to follow that storyline from the original comic and then sort of make a new property of it. I have a difficult time imagining it happening, but just the fact that it was proposed, like, wow,
Yeah, for me,
fascinating.
I was seeing, as you notice, I've been pioneering a lot of stuff, so I was not stuck into doing always the same thing. So I might have pushed in that direction. It could have been. It's like two major property going on at the same time. It would have been really interesting. Whatever. Yeah.
And do you think that I mean, were you still hoping? I know that Cybersix ultimately wound up being a series targeted more at tweens or younger teens, more as at least the commercial demographic. But were you still hoping that it could? I know you mentioned you wanted to do more. You hoped it could be more psychological stories in season 2. Did you hope it could still lean to an older audience, or could lead to more productions for an older audience after that? Because I know that was part of your whole incentive behind developing Cybersix, was to explore the untapped area of animation for older teens and for adults, which was sort of being neglected at that time in animation production.
Yeah. Definitely, I would try also, because there's other. You could have a broadcaster who broadcasts only at 10 o'clock at night. You could find other sources of broadcasting. You could have two different levels. I mean, obviously the Japanese are very stiff, so I don't know how far they would have gone. But if there was, in this case, if it had worked, it was a little bit their baby, and they would have might had fun trying something else. I mean, they have such a strength, or anyway, TMS is such a big, huge monster that they could pay themselves a show if they want to, which they did with Cybersix to a certain extent. And
this was right at the time when in Japan, late night anime that aired after midnight was just starting to become a thing. So and then at the same time you had Teletoon in Canada, which had a late night adult lineup. So like you could see the path of where this could have gone, and it's just too bad it didn't pan out.
Yeah, it could have gone. It could have gone in that direction for sure. But for me, the major point of bringing it to adults was just to educate people with art, because I just find that our culture is so lacking art in general. That through animation you can elevate a little bit the consciousness of people to beauty. Instead of having just a motor in our brain to drive trucks.
That's very beautifully put.
Yeah,
and definitely resonates with the series as a whole.
yeah, as a whole. So the Japanese have that they do appreciate artwork. That's why they have that strong animation follow-up production, and all the comic books and stuff. They appreciate images. They appreciate. So it's a little bit, if we can move the Canadian into appreciating artwork, it would be so good.
So I get the impression that you feel not much has changed since the time that you were.
I think with the Trump, it won't help either.
Oh no!
Well,
Oh boy.
it's our notion of progress that is at stake. I taught here at the university, the local university, a class on production and management of multimedia projects. And I was reading on copyright how the definition. It's really interesting to see that how the people running say the progress is what drives our society, and it's about the betterment of our. They don't say comfort, but it's the equivalent of comfort. So it's about making ourselves more comfortable, which for me, it's not a goal on its own. All right, it's useful, you don't freeze in the winter, but other than that, there's no goal towards progress, and we're left really believing in science, technology, and economy, and canning completely art, community, cultural aspect. It's very unbalanced, as a it's very rare, by the way, that you read about civilization that economy is one of the main point of civilization. It never came as a main point of civilization. It's always come third, fourth, after philosophy, art. Anyway, it's all part of the same. And also just to have fun with adult using animation, you know. And in a sense, Richard Reynes, with whom we did that promo of Little Nemo with Koji, he went to work on The Simpsons. He went as one of the story editor on The Simpsons, and they strong of all that. They did a show for adults in a sense, or at least a content, you know.
Yeah, the last time we talked about Cybersix on this show, I mentioned that with online streaming, I think a lot of negative things have come from sort of television production moving towards that model.
Yeah.
We are seeing more of a business model emerging in the West to create animated shows for older teens and adults. But I mean, in terms of the appreciation of art as a society, yeah, I guess
Yeah.
we're maybe going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
A lot of the institutions that we've valued in Canada specifically for that are getting worse and not better. So
I mean, even in like America,
Yeah.
I look at like the situation with Cartoon Network where they've closed all that stuff, and they're all these really creator-driven shows are getting pulled off of streaming. I mean, it's the people who got to make the show they wanted to make that are artistic, it's just getting pulled off all these streamers. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. Well, it's a fight for younger people. I did my bit, so now it's somebody else to do it. I mean, I think you go with the flow and see and try to. On the other hand, there's so much creativity in the young people, so maybe the media is not important anymore, and it's small community of interest that makes sense, like you are doing right now.
It's unfortunate. You look at Japan and they on one hand you look at Canada. There's so much talent and potential that's not really getting tapped properly or recognized or getting the opportunity. And then you look in Japan, which is overproducing anime and stretching itself to the absolute limits that it's practically on the verge of collapse now. But it all kind of relates to maybe some common problems with, again, how we're approaching art as a society. Yeah, it's all very unfortunate.
Yeah. No, I mean it's we'll need the balance to come back. Right now it's economy, and the war will be on economy. Everything is on economy. Eventually, it will come back. There'll be a little bit more room for other stuff. But anyway, it's no reason not to stop doing artwork and enjoying it.
This is a little bit of a rewind. How did you fall in love with work so much and how doing art and that kind of thing? Like what got you there? Like
Art-wise, well, I think it has to do with not knowing anything else interesting. I'm a kid from the 1968. I was 18 years old in 1968. I don't know if you remember the sort of planetary revolution of 1968, where we took over all our institution, and we kidnapped priests and all that kind of shit. And we broke the 50s. The 50s was, if you look at shows from the 50s, the kids are dressed like the parents. They're just a small adult, you know. In the 60s, we wanted to express ourselves and break all that traditional mentality, that was extremely rigid. So the hippie movements and all the anti-system movement and all came in the 60s with Bob Dylan holding the flame. So that's where I come from. I'm a guy from Woodstock, from the hippie movement, from not cutting my hair, people saying to me, faggot or crummy or whatever, because we had long hair. Today you change sex, and it's that same position against the society. It's really interesting that we're still more or less on the same taboo line. But so the 60s anyway was, I will not get into the system itself, for sure. So I quit school and all that kind of stuff. And I went and lived up north, and I had buffaloes and on a farm, and we had fun for 10 years. And then I decided, well, I should do something. And I went back in art because I couldn't get into becoming a doctor. It would have been really boring. Or a lawyer, even worse. What do you do? There's not much you can do. You have to. And animation just happened, and it was a good job paying. But I could have been I went to fine art in printing. I could have been a printer. But nobody was living from printing. So, and animation was fun because it's never the same thing. Every day you do something else. So I stick with animation. And I think when you're a craftsman, you like doing things with your hand, So I could be a sculptor, or it doesn't matter. You do something creative with your hand, basically. It's drawing. But when the computer came in to do 3D animation, that's when I stopped the studio, because that's the last thing I want to do, and be in a dark room with screens, and it's not interesting for me,
I mean, the interesting thing about Cybersix too is it's one of the earliest digitally. It's hand drawn, but a lot of it was done digitally on that Celsius system by the same people who do Clip Studio Paint on computers. So it was kind of in the transition period between ink and paint to digital as well.
Yeah, it was the first. TMS was just organizing its coloring through computer. But when you get into 3D, something.
I feel like it was before a lot of the studios saw that and said, okay, how much money can we save by doing some of the things in 3D?
Well,
because you see like.
Well, I remember, first of all, the 3D was more expensive than traditional at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
And you had to invest, you had to invest in computers. So it was a question of, in 1995, I was saying, okay, should I go public? That was the option. Go public, raise some financing, invest a couple million in computer to turn your studio into a 3D studio, and then you become way more a businessman than a producer running a show. You know what I mean? So the people who were doing that kind of transition were all money driven, like at Bardell, Delna is from a banking family. Bardell, what's his name, was involved and married the big rich people. They all went for the money. That, so it depends what you want to build, but definitely 3D. I really appreciate John Lasseter when he did Waldo. Is it Waldo? The little lamp jumping on itself, jumping by its own.
Oh, the logo?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
well.
It was a short at first. The lamp.
Yeah, it was a little
Oh, was
short.
it?
That was the little short of John Lasseter, and it was his first short to prove that in
Luxo
3D,
Jr.?
Luxo, yeah, that's it. That to prove that it could be emotional or intelligent. How do you call it? Yeah, I would say emotional. That you can create emotion, and that's why they got him in Pixar right off the bat, because he saw what it could become. Meanwhile, I mean, we did a lot of work for Virgin Games, and I mean, we had to do basketball animation. Michael Jordan doing a slam dunk in 4 drawings. Well, how do you do that? It was the restrictions were so harsh at the beginning that, and the technology was complicated. The is it soft image or all the other type of software were extremely complicated to learn. So regular animator could not turn into 3D animator overnight.
Yeah, I remember I used to do, before I worked on packaging for animes and Blu-rays and stuff, I used to work in video game packaging. And I remember I got something in soft image from one of the Japanese video game studios. And I was like, this is so much more complicated than like Maya or
Yeah.
whatnot. Yeah, it was like so much, so way more esoteric. So yeah, I
Oh
understand.
yeah. At the beginning, it was really complicated. It got, after that, it got simpler and simpler. But at the beginning, it was really complicated. And so, and the company was in debt of Cybersix, and Billy never made any money either. I still owe tons of money on Billy. There's bankruptcy. There's on Billy, the German investor in the second series. He had put €2 million, and then he pulled back because we were late on scripts. I mean, my God! So he got he got banned of investing in France forever.
Oh my God.
That's funny. I mean, this the incredible story of bankruptcy. My friend Steve Walsh got his company pulled under his feet because the investors, he lost ownership of his company. He had less than 51% of the shares, and they wanted to cash on their money, so they sold Eva. But it's too bad because we were dealing with Art Rap, the guy who are doing the dog with his owner and puppet animation from England and stuff. We were dealing with really good people. We would have created some really great stuff, but it's complicated to deal in a world where the money is the king. To be both strong in money and in art at the same time. You got a few who are good at it, but it's rare. It's very rare. Anyway, in my case, I wasn't strong enough on the money side or interested on the money side to really go further in that direction. Anyway, very personal.
Okay. Well, I was just going to ask if anyone had final questions they wanted to ask Hervé.
Ooh, I do.
Okay.
Go ahead, Z.
Okay, hi, I'm Z. Hi. I have this question. I've had it for a long time. Is there a full 3-minute song for the opening Of Cybersix.
This has been controversial for a long time. There's mixed
Yeah. Well,
mixed reports on this. If there's an actual longer version of the beautiful opening theme to Cybersix.
definitely, I got the music and the words for a 3-minute song, but I don't think we ever recorded a full version. Robbie Finkel did not record, I don't think. And what's her name?
Huh.
Egan, the singer.
Coral Egan, yeah.
Coral Egan. I don't think she recorded one, but it exists. You know,
But it
the
exists.
music exists. Yeah.
It was written, but just not composed. And you might have it.
I might have it somewhere because I didn't keep a lot of stuff, but I think I did keep somewhere the music sheets and the words that goes
Oh
the
my
music
God.
sheets
That's
made by Robbie Finkel. You know.
that kind of stuff is the stuff that like is so in danger of being lost if it's not scanned or something, you know, like that is very much interest to I think all Cybersix fans. That's the one thing that in all of my digging and trying to get from TMS and stuff, like they were able to find me the they had the pilot, the commercial or the short and a lot of this stuff, but like they were just like it might exist, there might be, and they were like it might be there might be legal things where it can't be released or whatever. Please kindly accept that we do not have it or something like that. They were very polite about it, but it was like a weird thing where they were like, we don't know or have or this thing. So it's the one thing that people have asked about so much.
Well, if I find it, I can scan it and ship it to you, Samantha. Because
Oh my God.
I mean,
and then you do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anything Cybersix that you have that you would be willing to scan for us would be amazing. We would definitely get it out to the fans and stuff, because I mean, working on the Blu-ray, a lot of it for me is like I want to get this archival stuff out and preserve the show in the best way possible.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I kept anything else really from the production. You know, I might have some scan here and there, but like all the storyboards, and it's all gone. It's all gone. But I think the music, I kept it for some reason.
Well, it is a beautiful song.
I think I kept it because
it's so beautiful. That's why.
It's unique. It's unique to have music sheets, you know.
I mean, it's also an intro. It's an intro unlike any other cartoon intro, I think, too. Like it's very just beautiful.
Yeah.
No. At the panel, we sang the song.
Yeah.
There was no song backing. We all knew all the words and we just sang it.
Yeah.
And it, like, again, almost cried. Like the fact that an entire room full of people was that excited to see and just experience this show. It's again, you say like, oh, the money's not worth it. The money's not worth it. It's art. Yes. 100,000%. All of those people will always remember this show because of what it meant to them and how just excellent it was. So again, thank you.
Yeah, and I thank Robbie Finkel. I mean, it was a big fight with TMS on that one. Well, we got that one. Anyway, so many things that could be done another way. But yeah, okay.
Well, you made a beautiful piece of art, and we all appreciate it. I will have to say,
without doubt.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it myself, you know, because obviously I didn't do it alone, you know. So seeing the whole Cybersix was really nice, really nice. It's still very nice.
Oh, it's beautiful. I mean, for the Blu-ray, I had to go back to the master tapes, which are all in SD standard definition. But in I ended up having to scale them up for Blu-ray, and it's just so clean and beautiful, and like I've barely seen a show so like well produced that if you looked at it after it being scaled up and everything, it looks like it was made in high definition, right? Like it looks like that, even though it's, from a standard definition digibeta, right? And it's one of those things where I spent hours and hours, because it was all the interlacing of the era, 30i. I spent hours and hours and hours making sure it was perfectly progressive, 24 frames like it was originally animated. Like it was a lot of work, and it was one of those things where I felt like it had to be done because it was such a unique and beautiful show.
Well, thank you for doing that. That's one of the problem we have, is trying to move the master from one era to another era. It's so much money. It costs so much money to bring them alive. Like, for example, the Chinese market just opened to kids show last year or 2 years ago. Before that, they were producing their own kid show, and it was close to foreign products. So it would be an ideal place to bring Ability Cat, for example. But transferring the master from that era to today, they were charging so much money, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
That was just recently, you're saying?
Yeah.
It depends on who you use it, but and also what kind of tape format it was on too. There was a show called Reboot. It was done in Canada as well. That is on this crazy tape format that the machines don't exist anymore, and they had to import them from Germany to try to restore the show. But it's been a journey.
That's the restoration story of the decade, quite possibly.
Yeah. But reboot was interesting because it was done exactly parallel to Ability Cat. We did it exactly at the same time, and I knew the guy running Reboot because we worked both at Deke. He was in the sales, and he really didn't like me, and I really didn't like him. So there was that. But Reboot was one of the first 3D show. 3D TV series. Definitely the first one in Canada.
Yeah, it's the first one in the world.
Well, there was Insectors in France, and the studio that produced it. Technically, that was the first CGI show, but it was only but each episode was only 15 minutes, and Reboot is a 30-minute show.
Oh, that doesn't count.
So they get the distinction. YTV did run Insectors, but it debuted after Reboot. Yeah. I do find it kind of funny that people kind of overlook that fact. But I mean, the shows were made in parallel. The innovations are equally important. So it's a trivial distinction.
What's interesting in the Reboot, if you read all the story, is that he bankrupted about 3 companies to do Reboot.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't know if you've seen it, but on TELUS produced an 8-part documentary about the making of Reboot, and you can watch that on YouTube.
Oh my God!
Now,
okay,
it's fascinating, and there's just it's wall-to-wall interviews with the creatives. It's no ads if you watch it on YouTube as well, so it's highly recommended.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, thank you.
Yeah, this was incredible to say the least, Steve. We just wanted to learn more about Cybersix, but you have shed light on everything from just the Canadian production in general to the anime industry. It is amazing, and I'm so grateful that you accepted our invitation and came on the show, Hervé. Thank you so much.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Not too often.
It's a rare privilege to have you on, and I thank you so much. So that's going to wrap us up for this incredible episode. Brady, can you just let us know where people can find you online and anything you're working on that you can talk about right now?
There's not a lot I can talk about right now. You can find me on Twitter under my name, Brady Hartel. Blue Sky under Ashura O. If you look for Brady Hartel, I'm sure you can find me. I'm always working on cartoon stuff. I'm always working on video game stuff, and I post stuff about stuff that I like, cartoons I like, animation, or what I'm working on. Lots of stuff. I mean, the Lupin the Third and Digimon grind never ends. So look out for stuff for that, I suppose. But that's it. That's it for me.
I missed out on the Lupin the Third Part 5 release. I'm kicking myself because that's my favorite of the TV shows. It's out of print now.
Is it really?
So
I don't even have it.
It is, yeah.
I don't even have that, unfortunately.
Oh, get it. Get your hands on it if you can, any way you can. If you can get me a copy, I'd appreciate it too, but probably not. Yeah, and Z, where can folks find you online, and what are you up to these days?
ZK Art pretty much everywhere. Z the Raccoon, if you search that, I'll be there. What am I up to right now? I just went to Japan, so I've got a lot of videos about that are gonna come out soon. It's like things to do right because I did a lot wrong. So even though I've been there twice before, it's been 5 years since I've been there. So I was just like, okay, I could help some people with their packing and their traveling and all
You'll
of that
make
stuff.
horrible mistakes every time, and you'll always feel bad about it no matter how many times you go. You'll never get it right.
Every time. So yeah, I do videos about like mostly furry content and anime that I like watching, that kind of thing on there. If you like the sound of my voice, basically follow me on the internet. You'll hear it a lot. All right. And yeah, thank you again so much for having me on here. I am eternally grateful.
Always a pleasure.
Same.
And thank you for
100%. Thank you so much, and thank you, Hervé.
Thanks, Brady. I appreciate it. I know it's tough for you to find time sometimes, but I'm so glad you could be here and we could all be here for this. Thanks for tuning into Design and Canada. You can reach me on Blue Sky at jbetteridge. You can actually find my Japan photos there from my recent trip as well. So subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or YouTube Music, Spotify, or whatever your podcast app of choice is, and see you again. Thanks a lot.